Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Blessings and love to all aspects of myself. I spent a lot of years in show business, and I was an actor, I was a musician, and I had plenty of opportunity to examine this thing that we call the ego. And I have come to a few conclusions about egos. And what I have realized is that we have the opportunity or the option to switch between what I call the limited ego, which is the ego that is defined by our name, our parents, our occupation, our personal biographies, and the unlimited ego, which is what a lot of humans like to call God, but I rather call it source, or all that is. Anyway, I realized that if I could switch at will between the limited and the unlimited ego, I could find a way to navigate, to steer my vehicle, my little car, my physical body in the 3D matrix in a much more conscious and masterful way, so that I don't have to experience too many unnecessary accidents, and I won't kill people on the streets, so to speak. So having understood this difference between the limited and the unlimited ego, I found a way to see how it actually also corresponds with the idea of the micro and the macro self, or as the Master Yeshua, or Jesus the Christ, he was reported to have said, "I and my Father are one," and then that's exactly what he meant. That his little I had become realigned with the big I, which he called his Father, right, and which people call God. Anyway, that gives you an idea of how this exercise works. If you get into the habit of switching between the limited and the unlimited ego, I mean, you need the limited ego for certain situations. For example, if you're having a meal, or you're going out with a girlfriend or boyfriend, you don't want to be in your unlimited ego, because you can't really focus on what's on the plate in front of you. You can't really focus on a specific event and experience. So you really want to be able to zoom in on the micro and then enjoy having this individualized, this fractalized, this atomic event, to experience it fully as a limited form. That's one reason why I think we originally opted for the experience of physical embodiment in this 3D matrix, so that we could actually get into the nitty-gritty of existence, to actually enjoy our physical senses, right? Anyway, this is a funky matrix, but if we are trapped in our limited ego, then it stops being so funky. It just becomes really messed up. And that's what all of us are going through now in 2020. We actually find ourselves in a huge, well, I was going to say, but I'll censor myself, a huge mess. And we are unable to see our way out of it. And so if we could, for a moment, switch to the unlimited ego as a species, and reconnect with our own source, our own true origins. Now, how would that look? From that perspective, everything would fall into place. The pieces of the jigsaw will fall into place, and we could see the big picture, right? And from the point of view of all that is, from the point of view of source, all the problems that we have are just the problems of a fractalized, atomized, overly individualized species that no longer see the context in which they were born, in which they exist, and they don't remember that we actually all we are all actually part of a single a beam of stellar energy that was diffracted through a prism of density, and we turned into the entire rainbow spectrum. We became the whole spectrum of possibilities, and that's a wonderful thing to celebrate. But if you're going to argue about which color is better than the other color, or I mean, you're blue or red, I mean, it just leads to endless conflict and confusion, right? And so it's important to have this understanding of how it's not enough to just be a fractal or fraction. We have to become conscious of being a fractal. So an unconscious fractal is feels separate, feels totally separate from everything else. Anything beyond your skin, anything beyond your limited ego is not you. Right? Is a potential threat to you. Is a potential rival or opponent. Right? So if we actually attain this experience of reconnecting with the whole consciously while being a fractal, we then become clear. We attain a mental clarity that allows us to cut right through all the crap, all the programming, all the conditioning, all the nonsense that has been injected into our psyches from the moment we were born, and even before, because even before we emerge from our mother's wombs, we're already carrying the genetic baggage of the mother and the father, inherited over countless generations, thousands of generations from their ancestors who went through massacres, famines, war, distress, bereavement, a lot of misery. I mean, to me, this whole human experience, for the most part, if you actually look at it from the one perspective, it's actually been a veil of tears, right? It's been a lot of sorrow here. And, well, there's probably a reason why it has been such a veil of tears. I mean, if you postulate that we are being fed upon by a parasitic species whose diet is human suffering, right? That feed off and fatten themselves on human suffering, then you would understand why, if they had some way to hack our neural circuitry and reprogram us to serve their agenda, they would definitely make us inclined towards tragedy, inclined towards calamity and sorrow, because that's their food. They feed off our suffering, right? So if we actually became aware of that, we would then realize we can only do one thing: become conscious of this, and then consciously extricate ourselves from this cycle of drama, of conflict, confusion, and fear, which leads to our own suffering. Because the more we suffer, the more they feed off our energy, and of course, the only way we can get rid of them is to stop feeding them. And how? We have to become conscious. The more conscious, the better. The more, if we can become a fully conscious fractal of the whole. Now, that is what you experience. That's what you experience as a coherent field. Your energy field becomes coherent, by which I mean it starts corresponding with the principles of sacred geometry. Right? You attain a crystalline kind of a biofield, and you become a lot more centered, and then not only clarity but calmness prevails. You don't panic. You don't get into a useless fear. No, you find that you are able to consciously put yourself back in your heart and not get trapped in your mind, your overactive mind. And from being centered in the heart, you can experience a great deal of compassion, of empathy, of understanding of how things became like that. And from that perspective of compassion, you will be able to transcend the suffering. You'll be able to actually start understanding and loving the situation and sending a lot of healing to everything around you, right? So basically, becoming conscious, becoming clear, becoming coherent, and then feeling compassion, having compassion as your default setting. I mean, it is not possible as human beings for us to never feel angry with what's going on, with how stupid people can be, how destructive some children can be, how vandals. I mean, people who throw litter in a beautiful place, people who poison the well. I mean, people like that. Anyway, once we become compassionate though, and let our hearts be our guide instead of the mind, we basically will begin to experience for longer and longer periods the feeling of being conscious factors of the whole, which means we know who we are. We know that we are original. We are originally emanations of source, and all of us have the same source. All of us come from the same source, and therefore, as our own unlimited egos, there is nobody to compete with. Who are you going to compete with? Why are you going to be jealous? Why do you want to be jealous of yourself? Because everything around you is just basically an extension of your greater self, right? There's no reason to be jealous, and there's no one to compete with, right? So when we stop becoming competitive, we experience less and less conflict, and with less conflict comes less confusion. And when there's less confusion, there is the possibility that we experience fusion. Fusion with our own cosmic selves, fusion with the entire spectrum of existence, fusion with the whole biosphere, with all life forms, with not only the consciousness of this planet as a living goddess, if you like. We experience fusion with our own infinite potential, right? And when you actually experience that, all these problems that we are going through, all this nonsense, all this scarcity conditioning, all the fear, all this tyranny, all these mind control programs, they just dissolve away, they evaporate, and they get blown away like dandruff gets blown away with a strong breeze. And just a strong breeze comes and all the dandruff gets blown away. So we no longer have to worry about being trapped at this static level of consciousness, where as a species we are being preyed upon by parasites or predators who feed off our suffering, our fear, our anxiety, our misery, right? And that's how we go from being a mantra chanting Buddhist to becoming fully conscious as living Buddhas. And that's what we have to do now, to stop beating about the bush, so to speak, and cut to the chase and go for it. Yes, fingering rosary beads and chanting is fine, but become fully conscious. Have the courage to embrace your potential Buddhahood, not just be a follower and just memorize formulas. And goes the same goes for being a Christian. I mean, it's no use being a superstitious Christian who prays to some Superman who's going to fall out of the sky and rescue you from the mess. You have to become Christ-like instead of just calling yourself a Christian. I mean, no matter how strong your faith, how strong your belief, we have to be responsible for extricating ourselves from the mess that we found ourselves in a long time ago, and the mess is getting more and more dense, and we can't expect some kind of messiah to solve the problem. We can't elect some guy to come and take away all our pain, arrest all the criminals, punish all the wrongdoers. I mean, that is something that we grew up watching movies, and we believe that, oh yeah, the cavalry will come and save us. There'll be some superhero who comes and rescues us from the very jaws of death. Well, that's something that the movies like to program into us, this salvationist program. But I personally feel that no, that is not very adult. If you're going to become an adult consciousness, you have to take it upon yourself to become a fully conscious fractal of the whole, attain mental clarity, become coherent, and become totally compassionate. And then you will experience the whole reality around you as the universe. Why is it the universe and not I-universe? Because the universe is an emanation or expression, a creative expression of my core being, which is source. And if you have that same experience, you will also realize that I am part of your universe. Yes, it works for all of us as conscious fractals. we are each part of the whole, and we are all the same being, dreaming about our own lives, our own destinies. And if we do it consciously, as conscious dreamers, well, we have a lot more say in how the dream unfolds, and it's going to be a lot more pleasant. In other words, we are going to be able to manifest heaven on earth instead of let somebody else create hell on earth for us, right? So anyway, this is my 15-minute limit, and thank you for listening. And once again, bless all of you, conscious fractals of my own being.